name is Stella Bivens, and I am one of the co-head deaconesses at the Palm Springs Seventh-day Adventist Church, for those of you who don't know me. And I have been asked to share how to make communion bread. We'll be having communion the end of the month of May 30th, so it would be really a nice thing if you would make your communion bread and have your grape juice and join us online for a beautiful service. So we'll get started. You need whole wheat flour, some salt, and some olive oil, and then cold water. It's a very, very simple recipe. And after watching this, you go, oh no, I'm not doing that. You can always maybe buy some crackers, or if you have a recipe of your own, try that. So you put 1 cup of whole wheat flour in a sifter, add 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and sift that. I know there are other recipes for communion bread. This is just the one I was taught by the other co-deaconess, Pat Carp. So I just use this one. It turns out fine every time. But if you have a favorite communion bread recipe and would like to share it, I would enjoy looking at another one. Anyway, just get that nice and sifted out. Excuse me 1 minute, I forgot my fork. There we go. So once that is sifted, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of oil. I use olive oil. I've seen recipes with butter. I have seen that. But due to some health issues, you might not want to do that. Also, 2 tablespoons of cold water. I keep a little extra aside because sometimes it seems a little too dry to my liking. And if you're going to err when making this, you want to err on the moist side, not on the dry side. And I think it needs a little more. I have an extra tablespoon set aside, so I don't usually always use that much. Maybe half of it sometimes. That looks about right. So just mix that really well with your fork. And then I have a baking pan. Well, this is what I use. You can use any baking pan. And I always line it with parchment paper because I like to bake with parchment paper. Then I have a piece of wax paper, and I'll show you what that's used for in a minute. So go ahead and take your parchment paper off of your pan and set it on your working area. And pour out your dough. And of course my hands have been washed. My daughter always says, spell washed. And I tell her W, whatever I tell her. Anyway, then just work your dough a little bit, not a lot. Just sort of make it into a round disc. I guess that's what a disc is round though. There we go. Then you want to take your wax paper that you take and set that on top of there, and this rolling pin. You want to roll this out to no thicker than 1/4 of an inch thick. I like to do mine maybe a little thinner than 1/4 of an inch. That will be up to your own taste. This recipe, when I make it for the church communion, makes about 50 small pieces. So if you think you might like to try this, you might want to start out with a half a recipe unless you have a very large family. But these are very good. What has not been used and consecrated for communion can be used as crackers, I would say. Let's roll that out. This takes a few seconds. You want your oven preheated at 450, and you want to bake this 7 to 9 minutes, depending on your oven. And I find that mine takes about 7, maybe 8 at the most. But you want to watch your edges. If they start look like they're browning a bit much, you want to take it off. Looks like we just about got it. Yep. Rolling myself away there. Okay, so once you think you have it rolled out to the thinness that you would like, you take your wax paper off. Whoa, that's really going to come off there. There we go. Sometimes the edges are a little thinner and they'll stick to your wax paper, but that's okay. So now that you have your your dough all spread out, take a knife or whatever you might use and score your bread, your crackers, to whatever size you would like to have them for your communion. Place it back on your baking sheet, which should be very simple. And like I said, place it in your oven at 450 and bake it for 7 to 9 minutes, depending on your oven. And remember, it's 1 cup of whole wheat, 1/4 cup of olive oil, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of cold water, maybe a little extra if you need it. Roll it out to 1/4 inch thickness or less on your parchment paper. If you're not used to using that or you don't care to try that, just roll it out on your between 2 sheets of wax paper and put it on your baking sheet that way. And like I said, score it with a knife or whatever it is you might use to make your squares or your little pieces. Put it back on your pan, put it in your oven and bake it. It's a wonderful way to remember what Christ has asked us to remember, and that is to eat of the bread as his body, drink the wine as his blood. And so you can buy a little jug of grape juice and follow us on the internet for the communion service. And what a wonderful Sabbath that will be. And blessings to all of you, and enjoy that special Sabbath of communion. Thank you very much.